So now we'll begin our look at different types of economic systems by focusing on the last two types. In the previous lesson video, you looked at traditional and command economies, and now we'll finish with the economies that are the most common type in the world today, market and mixed economies. In a market economy, most key economic decisions are made by business owners and consumers. Business owners are free to choose what to produce and how to produce it, and businesses sell their products to whoever chooses to buy them. Market economy is under what we call a capitalist system, which means that most resources and businesses are privately owned. That means by individuals and households. Individuals and households can use, rent, or sell the resources that they own. And they own all the productive resources of land, labor, and capital. And they can use them as they see fit, with relatively little governmental interference. For example, because individuals own their own labor in market economies, they can rent it to employers in exchange for a wage or salary. Landowners can rent their property to a farmer or a business owner, or sell the land to a development company that wants to build houses or buildings on it. Entrepreneurs can start a business and succeed or fail on their own merits. A key feature of market economies is that exchanges of resources or goods for money take place voluntarily between parties. No one is forced to buy or sell resources or goods because a market economy is based on voluntary exchange and gives people so much freedom to start businesses and decide how their resources are used. Therefore, it is called a free enterprise system. The United States is a primary example of a country with a market economy. Other countries with successful market economies include Canada, England, France, Germany, Japan, and Singapore. As discussed later in this module, most market economies contain elements of other economic systems as well, so the label market economy applies whenever private ownership and voluntary exchange play a major role. One of the reasons that market economies are so successful is because they provide great incentives to provide the goods and services that society wants. The incentives in a market economy are the gains and losses that follow from the economic choices of business owners and consumers. Any exchange in a market economy must benefit both sides, or else it wouldn't be carried out voluntarily. An exchange can also be called a trade. When buyers and sellers benefit from trade, economists say that there are gains from trade. To enjoy these gains, each participant in a trade has an incentive to ensure that the trade satisfies the other party. For example, a car dealer can't motivate a voluntary purchase without offering a car that satisfies the buyer. And the buyer can't motivate the voluntary sale of a car without offering enough money to satisfy the seller. The need to please others in order to enjoy personal gain is a driving force in all market economies. So, market economies have some significant advantages associated with them. When you want to buy running shoes, jeans, soda, or almost anything else in a market economy, you usually can, thanks to a strong set of incentives. Store owners are rewarded with more customers and higher profits if they stock the goods people actually want to buy. Manufacturers that ship goods rapidly to stores will rapidly make more money than manufacturers that are slow to respond to orders. The prospect of financial rewards for satisfying the needs and wants of others keeps individuals and businesses on their toes and helps ensure that goods are available when people want them. The availability of desirable goods is one reason market economies create higher living standards than traditional economies or command economies. Efficient production methods are another reason for high living standards in market economies. In a market economy, business owners have to pay for the inputs they use, so they have an incentive to avoid waste. For example, if a soda company can reduce its electricity costs by conserving energy, the company has a strong incentive to do so. Less money spent on electricity means more money to keep or to invest in the business. In the bigger picture, the soda company's decision to use less electricity frees up more electricity for the production of shoes, jeans, and other goods and services that people want. So when businesses respond to market economy incentives to produce more efficiently, the standard of living goes up. Market economies also tend to have rapid economic growth, largely because they encourage discovery and innovation. Inventors of useful products or processes can reap tremendous financial rewards. Consider Henry Ford, whose innovative use of the assembly line made automobiles cheap and Ford wealthy. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the entrepreneurs who started Google, along with eBay founder Pierre Omidyar and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg are billionaires. By satisfying millions of consumers and helping the economy grow, they made themselves rich. Finally, a market economy allows more freedom for consumers and businesses than traditional or command economies. People are free to make their own choices about where to work and what to buy with the money they earn. Businesses can decide what to produce and how to produce it. Indeed, freedom for individuals to make choices is the defining characteristic of a market economy. But there are also disadvantages in market economies. Like traditional and command economies, market economies have problems. One problem is equity, especially when viewed as equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. The prospect of multi-billion-dollar rewards for the most successful entrepreneurs, while a spur to innovation and growth, leads to highly unequal economic outcomes. In the United States, for example, 1/5 of all households earned less than $20,500 a year in 2009, while the average income among the richest 1% of Americans was about $960,000. In 2012, members of a group known as Occupy Wall Street held rallies across the United States to protest perceived inequities. The participants felt that some corporations charged consumers prices that were too high, paid workers wages that were too low, or in other ways contributed to unfair economic outcomes. Economic security can also be a problem in a market economy. There are no central plans or strong traditions to ensure that everyone has a job. It is up to each individual to plan for the future and find work. When a market economy is booming, people who want jobs can generally find them. But market economies also go through rough periods, sometimes lasting years, like the recession that we just went through, in which many people lose their jobs and it is difficult to find work. Resource conservation is another challenge for market economies. When individuals decide how to use resources, they may overlook the effects of their decisions on the environment and on future generations. For example, consumers in the United States, generate about 30 million tons of plastic waste per year, including billions of single-use plastic bags. Most plastic comes from oil, which is limited in supply, and only 7% of plastic waste is currently recycled. Market economies may provide too few incentives to conserve resources and adopt renewable alternatives, such as polylactic acid, a plastic substitute made from corn. Finally, the powerful incentives in market economies can lead to behavior that goes against society's goals. There are incentives for drug companies to rush new medicines to market without adequate testing. There are incentives for businesses to grow so large that they can take control of markets, restrict the availability of goods, and inflate prices. And there are incentives for advertisers to mislead consumers about the benefits or costs of their products. To avoid problems such as these, governments can intervene with laws for the protection of society. When government involvement in a market economy becomes substantial, society has a new concoction that we call a mixed economy. Banana splits are a favorite dessert because they contain the advantages of fruit, ice cream, and chocolate syrup, without too much of any one thing. And you see that banana split right here. Mixed economies are really the banana splits of economic systems, and they're every bit as popular as a banana split. So let's go back. Let me just pause. I need to get back to the correct slide here. There we go. A mixed economy combines a market economy with significant government involvement and elements of tradition. All modern market economies are mixed economies. For example, in the United States, while most decisions about resources are still made by individuals and most resources are still privately owned, government agencies make key decisions about public services, including national defense, education, and police protection. The government also regulates activities that could present harm to society, if left unchecked, like drug sales, food production, child labor, the use of smoke detectors, and the release of pollution. Government involvement in market economies has evolved over time. In the novel Oliver Twist, British author Charles Dickens described the food ration in a 19th century house for the working poor this way: 3 meals of thin gruel a day, with an onion twice a week, and half a roll on Sundays. It's no wonder that young Oliver, the central character in the novel, famously asks for more. Countless reports of the mistreatment of women and children during the Industrial Revolution led governments to enact new laws for their protection. In England, the Factory Act of 1802 restricted the number of working hours for young apprentices to no more than 12 hours a day. Can you imagine that now, working 12 hours a day as a child? Employers were also required to treat their young workers more humanely by providing clothing, instruction in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and at least one bed for every 2 apprentices. By today's standards, this doesn't sound very appealing at all, but conditions were so poor at the time that the Factory Act was a major improvement. Over time, governments and market economies have expanded their roles in the pursuit of equity, economic security, and sustainability. Because government oversight limits freedom but assists with other goals, there is much debate over just how involved government should be. In the United States, for example, some people think the government has overstepped its bounds. Others think the government should do more. We'll look more closely at the role of government and other features of modern market economies in Module 6. Now, this chart right here summarizes the differences among the 3 economic systems in their purest forms. This chart summarizes the primary incentives of a traditional economy and how well it meets each of the 5 economic goals. This next chart does the same thing for command economies, and the final chart does so for a market economy. So if I were you, I might pause the video at this particular point and copy these charts down into my notes so that you have a quick and easy summary of comparing the major incentives of each of the 3 economic systems we've just studied and how well they achieve each of society's primary economic goals.